In this world, there are two types of people, those who have powerful skills, and those who don't. People born with powerful skills are respected, while people without them become failures, who are treated harshly by society. Fate, a guy with a skill called gluttony, a skill that only makes him hungry. Fate works as a gatekeeper. Some holy knights from the Bellic family approaches Fate and started mocking him. They threw some coins as his salary on him, and asked him to pick them up, and that he should be grateful. When Fate starts picking up the coin, the knight kicks him in the belly. Fate goes flying away. Then the knight steps on his face and asks him to get up. Suddenly a female knight, Roxy, appears from behind and stops them. The bully knights then left. Roxy asks Fate about his health. Fate gets shocked because no one called him by his name before. He then gets up and tells her that he is fine. Roxy then tells Fate that if those knights ever do something to him again, he should tell her. Fate gets flustered and said it's alright and suddenly left for his home. Fate does not want to involve Roxy as she might also get bullied by the holy knights from the Bellic family. On his way towards home, he sees some bandits sneaking into the city, and that place was a blind spot for Roxy while guarding. So he runs back to Roxy and tells her about them. Roxy then goes to the place where Fate last saw them. After some time, someone started approaching the gate. Fate thought it was Roxy, but soon Fate finds out that it was an injured bandit that ran from Roxy. The bandit then asks Fate to get away from the door. Fate, who have not dealt with anything like this before, is confused, but finally mustered up the strength and started charging towards that bandit with the spear he was holding. Due to the sudden attack of Fate, bandit was not able to react at all and Fate killed him. Suddenly something started happening to Fate. A notification appears, gluttony activated. All the stats and skills of that bandit started coming inside Fate. Another notification appears saying all stats are up, and skills appraisal and mind reading have been added. Suddenly Roxy comes running towards Fate and asks him if he is okay. She then tells him that she mistakenly let one guy slip. Fate tells Roxy that he is okay and he did not even get hurt. Roxy calms down, but Fate is still confused as to what the heck just happened. He then asks Roxy to pretend that she took care of the bandits. Roxy asks Fate as to why she should, but Fate persists because it will be troublesome for him if the knights from the Bellic family finds out about this. Roxy then agrees to it and tells Fate that she will report it like the way he wants. Fate thanks Roxy, but Roxy says she should be the one thanking Fate because if he didn't warn Roxy about those bandits, it would have damaged the name of the Hart family. Fate says no at first, but later, after seeing Roxy pouting and acting cute, he agrees to it. Roxy then asks Fate to start working for her family, and that if she tells her father about this incident he will take him in. Fate replies that his skills are useless, and there is some problem with the Bellic family too. Roxy tells Fate that he don't have to worry about the Bellic family, and asks him that if he intend to work for the Bellic family all his life. Fate then agrees to Roxy's request. Roxy asks Fate to go back home because it's already night time, and asks him to visit her family the day after tomorrow. Next day, after waking up, he starts thinking about the voice he heard yesterday after killing that bandit. He then says the word appraisal, and a window with his stats appears in front of him. Fate gets shocked after seeing that all his stats are increased to 3 digits. Fate then figures out that his skills is not useless, and he can become stronger by killing and stealing their stats and skills. After figuring that out, Fate is happy and starts heading towards the market to buy a weapon. Fate checks his pocket. He only have 2 silver coins. As Fate was going through the market, a shopkeeper calls Fate and asks him that is he looking to buy a weapon. Fate goes to his shop. Then the shopkeeper asks him about his budget. Fate shows him the 2 silver coins he have. The shopkeeper feels disgusted and starts mocking him and points him towards the trash weapons he got. Fate thinks about he will get treated like this at every shop, so it's better for him to just buy from this shop. He then appraises all the weapons and turn out they really are scraps. While he was picking a weapon, suddenly he hears a sound.
Buy me.
Fate gets shocked and confused and thinks about how the heck this sword just talked. Fate then picks the sword again. The sword finds Fate interesting because he is not running away and starts talking again. Fate figures out that he can hear the sound of sword because of the skill, mind reading he got. Fate then uses appraisal on the sword, but Fate isn't able to see anything apart from the sword's name and form. Fate starts sympathizing with the sword after seeing how the sword is treated just like him. The sword then asks him if Fate is going to buy it. Fate tells the sword that we are similar to each other and would be perfect for each other. Sword then asks him about his name. He tells him that his name is Fate Graphite and then asks the sword what he should call it. Sword replies, "Call me Greed." After that he leaves the shop and starts going towards the south gate where all warriors gather to form up a party to subjugate monsters. Suddenly a person appears and asks him if he wants to form a party with him. Fate gets excited. Then the person asks him about his level. Fate replies with confidence, "It's level 1. The person, after hearing Fate's level, disappears from there. Then the greed tells him that it's better not to form a party because of the skill, gluttony he got, and warns him that he should never use that skill in front of people. Fate gets shocked because he has never told Greed about his skill, and asks Greed how does he know about his skill, gluttony. Greed then tells him that you and I are the same and you will come to understand it eventually. Fate then thinks about what Greed's saying is true, because if people comes to find out about his skills, they will kill him eventually. He then decides to go alone to hunt goblins. Fate then goes towards the south of the capital which goblins have made their home. They attack and pillage every carriage going from there and kills whoever is in there. Fate finds a goblin sleeping in the south fields. Fate uses appraisal to check his stats and skills. After checking everything, he attacks the goblin and kills him in one blow. Fate gets a new skill called Strength Up Small. After that he checks his skill board and gets happy because his stats increased further. Fate then cuts off the ears of the goblin to sell them to a converter later. After lurking through the fields for some time, he finds two goblins, one with a shield and one with a sword. Fate then appraises the goblins and finds out that the goblin with the shield is a goblin guard, and thinks about if he attacks and that goblin with shield blocks him, it will be a pain in the ass. Fate then takes out the greed and starts charging towards the goblin with a sword. Fate jumps in the air to make his attack more powerful. At that time the goblin guard notices him and comes to help his companion. Fate, who didn't know anything about his own strength, cuts the goblin in 2 pieces. Gluttony activates. Fate is shocked because he wasn't expecting himself to cut through that shield. Fate then kills the goblin with the sword in one blow. After that, Fate checks his stats again, finds out that he didn't get any skill for killing the goblin with the sword. Fate then figures out that if he wants to gain new skills, he needs to hunt other monsters. Fate then takes out most of the goblin in the southern field and gathers the parts he needs to convert into money later, and checks his status window again. Fate gets shocked because half of his stats have went over 1,000, but he notices that he didn't even level up once. Greed then tells Fate that it's because of the skill Fate possess. Gluttony, a skill that steals the stats of others when you kill them. People with a skill like that defies the divine concept of leveling up, and that's why Fate can't receive any blessing of the gods to level up. Fate then asks Greed as to how he knows so much about his skill. Greed changes the question by saying it's getting late and we should get back to capital. Fate agrees with Greed and starts going back towards the capital. After returning to the capital, Fate goes to the guild and sells the goblin parts he gathered to the guild. After seeing too many of the goblin part, the guild converter asks him if he was hunting with the party, because if you kill too many monsters of the same species in the same day, they will hold a grudge against him and attack him in groups. Fate then tells the converter that he didn't know anything about that. Converter tells him it's okay because he fought so much of them alone and that's why he is in rags. After that she asks him to wait for a moment while she prepares his rewards. Fate starts thinking what he should eat for dinner. Greed suddenly asks Fate to clean him up before dinner and tells him that maintenance is like what food is to him. Fate agrees to Greed's demand and goes into a blacksmith shop for the maintenance of Greed. After coming out from the shop, Fate starts worrying about how worthless the last 5 years were. Then Fate thinks to stop worrying about the past because Fate's got a future to face. Greed then asks Fate that he needs to learn to maintain Greed himself. Fate agrees to what Greed said because it's hard to pay 10 coppers every time just for the maintenance. Fate decides to buy the tools for maintenance after dinner. Then he goes towards a place which sells grilled meat and decides to eat there. Suddenly a bald man pushes Fate aside and calls him a weakling. Fate gets angry, but the bald man leaves the place while dragging a female child. Fate tries to stop him and sees that the child is asking him to save her. Fate gets shocked because he thought that man was her father and then uses appraisal to check who is that man. But it turns out that the bald man has no skills. Greed then tells him that it must be a hiding skills that hides the skills its owner has. Fate is still confused. Greed then tells him that the bald man is a warrior, but his eyes were of a murderer. Fate then starts following him because Fate thought he might kill that girl. The bald man then drags the girl inside a storehouse. Fate thinks, what is he doing here? Greed then tells him that he might be taking the girl to sell her. Fate then starts watching through the window. The bald man starts beating the little girl. Fate thinks that girls resembles the past him. The bald man then tells the girls that he is going to sell her as a knight's plaything. The kid says no from doing it, The bald man then grabs her hair and asks her to be a good girl because he might just kill her. He then kicks the child in the belly and leaves the room. After seeing him leave the room, Fate gets inside the house and breaks the chain on the kid's hand and tells her that he is here to save her. The kid says she is okay now. Fate then asks the kid, "Let's get out of here." The kid looks happy. Fate asks if she can walk, but suddenly the bald man comes back. Bald man then starts telling them that from time to time someone comes to help the kids he kidnaps, and then he kills the rescuer to make the kid more obedient. The bald man then asks Fate to die while screaming to make the kid more obedient. Greed then asks Fate to lead bald man towards the boxes. Fate starts running with the kid towards them. They came to a spot where there is no more place to run. Bald man, after seeing that, starts mocking Fate. Fate charges towards him and cuts one of the bald man's hand. Fate then interrogates the bald man about the knight he was going to sell that kid. Bald man tells him the name of the knight from the Bellic family, Hud Bellic. Fate gets angry and decides to make them pay someday. The bald man dies, and the skill gluttony activates. Fate gets to new skills called concealment and the art, sharp edge. An art that allows its user to attack twice when countering. Fate then thinks that if the bald man had used this skill, Fate would have died. He then hears a growling sound from the kid's stomach and figures out she is hungry. Then he goes back to the restaurant with the kid and both of them eats together. After eating, Fate takes back the child to the orphanage where she lives. He then leaves the child near the orphanage. The child stops him and says thank you. The child then leaves towards the orphanage. On the way to his home, Greed asks Fate that what is he worried about. Fate then tells Greed that he's just thinking that he have a long way to go. And then Fate tells Greed that just the thought of visiting the Roxy's family tomorrow is making his stomach ache. Greed asks him to calm down, and then Fate goes back towards his home. Thanks for watching. Please like, share and subscribe.